Alright, time to read chapter 304 of Akagi. With this, only 3 will remain. Once again, it looks like Akagi is leering at a woman in a bikini. Ridiculous, but okay. So he has executed his insanely intricate prank on the Yakuza, who he anticipated would be coming for their money. Left them literally holding the bag all night. But just as he was making his getaway, just as he was strutting off satisfied in his stupid prank that cost him like millions and millions of yen, they stop him. Wait, they say. Don't just leave. Now, Akagi, I don't think, has any fear of death. I don't think he's at all concerned that they're just going to turn around and take some shots at him because they have the gun. But he's going to hear them out, I think. I don't know. I don't know if there's further negotiation. There's going to be another supplemental gamble here. I don't know what's going on. Answer me. Oh, shit! This is the guy. Oh, I love this. I love this. This is the guy. So if you don't recall, I don't know why you'd be watching this without also maybe refreshing yourself, but no, I shouldn't expect people to do that. I'll explain briefly again the gamble that Akagi was playing. Basically, it's there's one guy on the Team Yakuza, on the house team, that chooses one card out of 6, and then everybody else bets on what card he chose. Very simple, right? There's some additional rules around. You can hedge your bets on multiple cards. You can have follower bets where you bet on somebody else's bet, which everybody was doing with Akagi. But basically, Akagi was just straight up betting on a single card and getting it right, like, an extremely high percentage of the time. I like that it wasn't 100% of the time, because that would be too absurdly magical. Only Akagi in his elder years could pull something off like that. But he was getting it right like 60% of the time, or something absurd, which is how he managed to get this huge pile of cash from the Yakuza. And here, at the end, although he accepts the situation that Akagi's put them in, what he doesn't get is how did Akagi get it right so many times. I love this. I love that it comes back to that initial gamble. I love that he's obsessed with this in the end. What's my tell? I won't let you say it was just coincidence. You can't win that much through a fluke or sheer luck. 4-card bet would be one thing, but a Suichi, a bet on a single card, is a different story. After a certain point, when you start getting Suichi right, bet after bet after bet, there had to be something that you could see there. Your C was a considerable distance away from mine. Can't imagine you could infer anything. I love this. Oh, I love this. This feels appropriate for the finale. The whole crazy fishing prank I found very funny, but the whole time I was thinking, Fukumoto is such a weirdo to spend so much time in these final chapters on this prank. But this, directly trying to figure out what is the core of Akagi's insane gambling talent, what allows him to do this. That's what I want to see be the finale of the series. Movements of my body, like my posture or muscles or my facial expressions, just not enough that you can see from that distance. So what was it? Answer me. What were you able to see? You just said you wouldn't let me say it was a coincidence. What I was able to see was, in a way... And this is it. Like, Akagi pulls off these miraculous feats again and again and again. And often there is an explanation that psychologically he worked out, oh, you're so much more likely to discard this tile than that tile. You know, things like that come up all the time throughout the Mahjong adventures, his battle against Wishizu, all that stuff. But other things have no explanation. And what I'm thinking of here is one of the most beautiful scenes in all of Fukumoto manga, in all of manga period, during these final arcs of Akagi, or of 10, where Akagi is dying. One of his previous opponents comes in and wants to play a very simple tile matching, or a very simple game with him, where you each have 1 through 9 in a Mahjong suit, and you just want to play the higher tile, and whoever wins more times wins. And he makes some conditions where if Akagi wins, well, that's proof that Akagi is actually pretty well off and shouldn't be killing himself. And if this guy wins, then he gets to tell Akagi not to kill himself. And either way, Akagi's not going to kill himself. This is a very clever plan of his. And Akagi accepts that, yes, those do seem like two reasonable conditions. Either I lose the gamble and there should be consequences, or I win the gamble and clearly I'm capable of still winning gambles. And it's a cool little game. There's a lot of strategy around. When do I deploy my higher tiles? I want to make sure my higher tiles are always taking the one immediately below it, like my 9 beats their 8. And basically, Akagi realizes, though, there's still a gap in the conditions where if he just ties every single time, if he just matches the tile each time, then neither of the conditions are met. And presumably that, in his mind, he thinks, well, that'll allow me to just go ahead with my plan of taking my own life. And so he does that. He matches the tile the other guy plays every single time. And there's this heart-wrenching scene where there's only 2 tiles left. And the guy is going, well, this is it. It's as good as a tie. He's flabbergasted that it's come this far. And he says, no matter what, if Akagi wins one, then I'll win one. There's no way Akagi can win both. It's a tie from here. We don't have to play it out. And yet Akagi continues to play it out. And he realizes that Akagi's cognition really is in decline. That the Alzheimer's have prevented him from seeing that it's effectively a tie already. And then he realizes that maybe Akagi has now just seen this as a tile matching game. And he's forgotten the actual rules. And he just wants to play this out as a game where I match the tile you play. And it's this combination of his respect for Akagi's miraculous gambling talent, that he was able to beat these insane odds and match the tile each time. But at the same time, knowing that he's in decline, that he accepts that Akagi should be allowed to take his own life, that he's like a being beyond his comprehension, and he shouldn't be trying to dictate what Akagi can and can't do. It's a beautiful, beautiful scene. Just him walking out into the starlight afterwards and crying at the miracle he just witnessed. What was I saying about all of this? Oh yeah, basically that scene has stuck with me every day since the day I read it. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of manga. And this kind of reminds me of it, insofar as it's confronting this idea of Akagi isn't just a skilled gambler, there's something more. There's something mystical happening. But maybe it's not so mystical. Maybe we will receive here an explanation of what it is that Akagi sees that allows him to wield these miracles. What I was able to see was, in a way, coincidence. Don't get smart with us. First you throw our money into the ocean, now you're trying to confuse my brother. You have it backwards. The ones who takes pride in confusing people here isn't me, it's him, the dough. After you're about 2 hours into the night, at that point I noticed you changed gears. I see. I think he's going to say, up until that point, you were just kind of choosing them at random. And it was just luck of the draw for the gamblers and for you. But then at a certain point, he started to try to outwit Akagi. That's the gear changing. And that's when Akagi was able to recognize something. You had control over the game. You'd act like a professional Tenhon Biki-do should. And read what the players would bet on and go against it. Oh. Interesting. He's attributing a lot more control to the dough than I originally thought he would. Choose a bad card that several players had bet on. Let them win some small bets. Then once they got confident, you can take anything from them. Your normal method as a Tenhon Biki-do. I see. That was only when things were going well for you. Against a player you didn't know, a player you've never met, didn't know the betting habits of, but still keeps winning. When that kind of guy appears, you stop fighting. You give up trying to read them and try to conceal yourself in a mist. To put it one way, you throw your mental dice. You try to do it random. You try to do it really random and ignore reading people and trying to outmaneuver people take the result and put it in the kamishita. Or all the strategies, the thoughts, and the progression prior to produce a result. It's true. If you're someone who tries to read the projection of the card, it's hard to guess right. After all, the meaning behind the different cards you choose all disappears at once. This is actually a really cool game, I think, by the way. It's so simple, and it really is luck-based no matter how you slice it. Like, there is no psychicness, there is no layer of psychology that you can exploit here. But at the same time, like, it feels so satisfying, I would imagine, to just guess right over and over. It reminds me of playing, like, Pokemon in battle simulators. I would always play stall teams. And what I really liked especially is stall teams where you read when they're going to switch and you read when they're going to attack, and that's based on them reading whether you're going to switch or attack. And you bring in your physical wall or your special wall. When I played a lot, it was Blissey and Skarmory. I said those backwards. Skarmory was the physical wall, but whatever. You swap between Skarmory and Blissey when you read that they're attacking, and then you use setup moves like spikes or seismic toss or something that chips away at their damage, or whirlwind, when you read that they're going to use an ineffective attack or they're going to swap, right? So basically you're reading their read of you. It bounces back and forth like that many times, but conceivably even further, but functionally that many times. And you're basically just trying to guess what they're guessing over and over and over again. And it's so satisfying if you just get in their head and you just think what they're thinking, and you feel what they're feeling, and you know when they're like frustrated, you know when they're thinking they're outwitting you, you know when they think that they've caught you stumbling, whatever, all based on every single other guess up until then. In the end, it's basically just like playing rock, paper, scissors, but like just the small added complexities allow for so much more of the psychological grasp. But at the same time, they could have been flipping a coin over there to decide whether attacking or swapping was better. And if they were flipping a coin, then I'm trying to analyze the psychology of flipping a coin, and that's just stupid. And it's like the same here. Like, it's so weird. It exists in this liminal space between reality and not, between random chance and actual talent, between psychological analysis and luck. Like, it's so cool. It feels so cool playing a game like that, especially when you're succeeding. That's the way you try to avoid a catastrophic loss from a bad run in Tenbiki. You mystify yourself. You start trying to do it randomly. Then once you've thrown everything into confusion, you start trying to read the players again and producing results that deliberately choose. If the player's thrown off by that secondary selection method, they get confused, knocked off balance, and ruined. They end up throwing all their money away. That coincidence strategy is your secret weapon. The final line of defense. Foundation that you survive in the Tenbiki world. Okay, so Akagi, I think, is not saying, I can still read you when you're doing it randomly, when you're throwing the dice in your brain. I think he's saying, I can read you after that. When you think you've thrown everything into confusion and you reestablish reads, you reestablish being one step ahead of the guessing of the opponents, I think Akagi's saying that's when I seize you. When it comes down to it, coincidence is the strongest and hardest to read. When in doubt, you can always run away to coincidence, something like that. They're so mad. Mad because bad. Mad because they know he's right. What the hell do you mean run away? That's a fine strategy. Coincidence can't be read. It's fantastic. And my brother is able to do that through his insights alone. Ooh, wait. So basically saying it is actually quite a talent to be able to throw the dice in your head. And I've thought about it a lot before. Humans are really bad at just generating randomness on your own. If you ask someone to say numbers randomly, very quickly you'll realize that it's much more patterned and much more readable than, any sort of actual random number generator. Like, oh, blah, 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 true randomness doesn't exist, but we can create randomness that is a trillion times better than anything a human being can do. Which is why I've tried to come up in fighting games, in Melee. I've tried to come up with things like you look at the timer in the seconds column, which is essentially random, and you try to decide when you go in, when you do a certain opening, when you do certain aggression, based on that, and that allows you to be more random and unpredictable than if you just try to be random and unpredictable. But it's never been feasible. Like, I just, looking at the timer and thinking that way, it's just distracting from actually just having a good plan and executing. But I've, like, thought about this sort of stuff a lot. Like, how can you generate semi-randomness in that sort of scenario, and how can that help you? And I think in another Fukumoto series, they talked about, like, looking at the clock and trying to make pseudo-random decisions based on that. I left a comment in the comments section about this. What series was that? Your content? It was in Hero, I think. They were looking at the clock and using that to decide. How do I find this? When did I leave this comment? Yeah. Oh, it was in it was in the Toho Mahjong Dojinshi. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, how do you create pseudo randomness in your head? How do you become unpredictable just using stuff that's available to you at this time? So it is quite the tactic. But what is Akagi's criticism of it? That's just it. Insights. People's insights are hard to deal with, and they realize having an insight completely devoid of your own thoughts, desires, and fundamental fears, not biased by any outside influence, that kind of insight doesn't exist. So Akagi is basically challenging this exact challenge that I've confronted before. I'm very happy that this coincided so well, that they're talking about things I've already thought about in such depth. Because basically, Akagi, I think, is right. You can't just pop a random number into your brain. And what I was suggesting, sources of pseudo-randomness, like looking at some external thing and correlating something you see with something you do, that's still readable too. That's not enough. You can't seed something that somebody else can't also see. Interesting. So I think what he was doing in that time of mist is getting some sort of external influence to figure out what tile to choose that he thought was close enough to random. Like looking at the serial digits of some bill, right? And the final serial digit they see on that yen bill determines the number. And Akagi caught on to that. And that's the source of his real miraculous talent. At the very least, the insights of your do aren't like that. Looking at it from an outsider's perspective, cards he chooses may seem like truly random occurrences, but those aren't actual coincidences. Oh, I'm so excited. What is it? I think the serial number of the bill is actually a pretty good one, because he sees all this money around him the whole time. And it's a combination of being, like, feasible that Akagi could catch on to that and play based off that, but so tremendously unlikely that it still speaks to Akagi's transcendental, miraculous gambler status. Like, if he looks at a random bill each time, then Akagi, his real skill is reading which bill he's going to happen to look at with each gamble. Something like that. They're manufactured coincidences. This is so cool. And again, it's like, is this really what we're focusing on right at the finale? It seems like such a tangent. It seems like such a bizarre thing to explicate on and to really consider at this depth. But this is at the heart of, like, every Fukumoto series. What is randomness really? What is luck really? How do you transcend and take that step beyond that uncovers the true face of luck, which is, in fact, psychology? What the word random really means is, like, if I was holding 50 ghost stones in my hand and then let them fall to the ground and scatter in every direction. Random is how you describe those ghost stones. And that randomness, patterns and deviations will always emerge. Find clusters of ghost stones in some areas, while other areas will have the ghost stones spread far apart. That is what a truly random coincidence is. This is interesting too. I'm just never going to shut up. This is too much fun. So this reminds me a lot of in Gödel, Escher, Bach. There's a very compelling, very almost haunting passage on recognition of intelligence in other systems. That certain systems are so sophisticated and produce such complex results that it is so natural to be tempted into ascribing them some sort of agency or intelligence or control or something, when in fact it is, in fact, totally random. And they give the example of a ball rolling down like a bumpy hill. And each time it hits a bump, it effectively randomly goes one way or the other, right? It's like so unpredictable, so you'd have to model the physics of it so minutely to be able to anticipate where it goes. And following a ton of these balls rolling down this hill, sorting themselves out in all sorts of weird ways, you will eventually create something that looks like a bell distribution. There's a great 3 blue 1 brown video about this, but it ends up looking patterned. And you can recognize all sorts of other patterns, and you can recognize all sorts of things that seem to emerge from some sort of agency, from some sort of control. But there's none. It's just random. It's just bouncing down randomly. And it just so happens that we can perceive what we think are patterns from true randomness. Anyways, that's a tangent, because Akagi is also pointing out that this is true randomness, and no matter what it is you see in there, it's true randomness. But what he's talking about is not that. What he's talking about is what humans can achieve, which is never true random. The randomness you create in your head doesn't count as a coincidence. The ghost stones you drop are arranged neatly with similar distances between all of them. It's manufactured randomness. This is so cool. I don't know if it's that Fukumoto has actually read about this stuff before, has read similar things than I've read, and has, learned about this from the perspective of statistics, or if he is just coming into these insights on his own as someone who has thought more about the psychology of gambling than maybe any other man on earth in the process of writing these masterpieces, and has arrived at these same conclusions as statisticians and such. Without even intending it, you inevitably try and make the outcomes balanced. Yes, this is one of the most common problems people have when trying to generate random numbers in their head, is they think, oh, I'm due for a 7. If you're just creating a random 1,000-digit number, you're going to subconsciously, no matter how much you try to fight it, make them balanced and think, oh, I'm due for a 7. Oh, I haven't said 12 in that sequence yet. That's bound to happen at least once. Ooh, I haven't had consecutive numbers for a while. I'm going to say 666 right here. Shout out Satan. Ooh, I haven't had, a run of sequential numbers. So here I'm going to put 5, 6, 7. All these things that we know ought to happen in random numbers being generated, we will try to replicate randomly without meaning to. And in doing so, we've created something that's very, very far away from random. The game of Seihonbiki, when you move the Memoku that matches the card you chose to the far right, it shows the player which cards have come up more recently. Your mind is focused on repeating that over and over, so it's hard for you to see the whole picture. This is interesting too. This is talking about, specifically the mechanics of this game, which when explained at first seemed kind of convoluted, but I was like, well, this is like a real game, so there's going to be some weird baggage that just comes from all sorts of like anti-cheating measures and stuff. And most of them were explicable thinking about anti-cheating stuff, but also thinking about how it affects the psychology is amazing. When you're not relying on your coincidences, you're the kind of dough that deliberately chooses some cards a lot and other cards hardly at all. That helps lure the players in by letting them think you have a bias in the way you select cards. But that's only true when you're choosing each card by design. Once you've gone into your coincidence strategy, the outcomes become much more uniform. In other words, over the course of 30 or 50 cards, you try to make the outcomes evenly distributed across the 6 kinds of cards. He's getting so fucking owned! And this is true. This is what human beings do when they're trying to be quote-unquote random. Now, I don't know if he has some external system for rolling the dice. I was eagerly looking forward to such a revelation. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe he just, like a fool, tries to pop a number into his brain. Maybe like an even greater fool, he thinks this is what randomness ought to look like. And so I'm deliberately upping the counts of the ones that are lower and stuff. Which means the rest is quite simple. I just kept track of which cards he'd chosen the least and put my bet on one of the two least common. It really is that simple. Get wrecked. Akagi-san. See? You'd win half the bets doing that, wouldn't you? And that was like a round of his win rate was around 50%. And maybe this series really ended because the Yakuza came at Fukumoto for ruining this game. Oh, man. Okay, I had a lot to say about that one. I'm sure I'll have a lot to say about the next two. So let's keep it moving. We have 305 next. I'm having a blast. I hope you're having fun too. Bye-bye.